15th. And now we're going to record the meeting. So we will start with our roll call, and I have some exciting news. I'm going to turn it over to Director Cameron to introduce Dawn Gooch, who is joining us as our new clerk of the board. Welcome.
Thank you. Just wanted to welcome Dawn. She started just last month with us and has filled that clerk of the board position. We're really happy to have her. Some of you may have seen her around working at regional parks prior to being here at SCTCA. And Dawn, please roll call.
Okay. Janice Cater Thompson. Present. Chris Corsi. Susan Harvey. Gerard Judice.
Excellent. Here.
Nasa Hinton.
Like we're ready.
She said your name.
Here. Oh, she is here. Okay. I'm sorry. Ariel Kelly.
Here.
Todd Lands.
Present.
J.B. Lee.
Here.
Sandra Lowe. Natalie Rogers. And Chair Linda Hopkins and David Rabbit. Both not here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. So now we do not have any teleconference disclosures for today. Is that correct? Okay. And we will move on to public comment on items not on the regular agenda. And I don't believe we had any submitted via email in advance of the meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Are there any members of the public wishing to make public comment in person today? Seeing none, and any on Zoom?
There's none on Zoom.
Great. So we will move on to the consent calendar. We have a number of items before us today. Item 4.1, which is our meeting minutes from the June 9th, 2025 meeting to review and approve. The Go Sonoma quarterly reporting, the Q4, which is just a report item. 4.3, Resilient State Route 37 and Long-Term State Route 37 121 improvements, which is an action item. And then our legislative update to consider positions on pending legislation. Any comments on these items from members of the board? Okay, any members of the public wishing to make public comment on the consent calendar? Anyone in the room? Anyone on Zoom? Great, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
So moved. Run apart.
A motion by Gerard Judice, Rohnert Park, and a second by Janice Cater Thompson of Petaluma. And we can do a voice vote. So all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And Director Cameron, did you want to make a comment on any of those items?
Thank you for your approval.
Okay. So now we're on to item 5A, our CPA items, and we have a equitable building electrification action plan status update report by BC CAP. So this is just receiving an informational update and providing feedback. Welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Give me just a second here to get our presentation up and ready. Okay, very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly and members of the board. My name is BC Caps. I'm our Climate Programs Manager here with SCTCA and wanted to give you a brief update today on work that I've been working on the last few months on our equitable building electrification action plan. I presented to this board several months ago, and I want to come back today with an update on our where we are in the process. So today I wanted to speak a little bit about several key points. I wanted to talk about kind of the causes of the problem as we see them having to do with countywide building emissions, some of the scale of that issue, some of the solutions to these problems, and then talk about our levers for action and our recommended actions that will be included as part of this final report. In there, I'm also going to speak about our community and stakeholder engagement. that we've been doing as part of this process, and then finish up with talking about our next steps for completion of this project. As a little bit of a background, I wanted to speak first about our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which staff here completes about every 2 to 3 years. So we wrapped this up. Our most recent inventory was done last year in 2024, and it analyzed 2022 emissions figures. A couple of the key things that I wanted to show on this graph. This is showing overall our trends from 1990 through 2022 there with the colored bars. And you can see that those emissions over the course of those 30 so years have been steadily declining, which is the great news. And the work of this report is really focusing in on that buildings line item that I have highlighted there in red, and looking at that, how that number going from 1.3 million down to 732,000 greenhouse metric tons over the course of the time is a fantastic improvement. But we still have a lot of room for improvement in that, and wanted to talk about some of the areas where we can continue to get those emissions down. The key other aspect here is the fact that buildings, transportation, emissions from transportation are by far the largest emission sector throughout the county, but buildings is our second largest emission sector with just over 23% of the emissions. And so that's why this work is focusing in there. Digging in a little bit more on that energy line item and thinking about what are the emissions associated with our buildings and building emissions. And it really comes from the use of our fuels that we use to heat for heating, space heating and water heating, and for cooking. And you can see here from this graph that over 77% of our emissions within the built environment are really coming from the burning of natural gas. I think the other key thing I wanted to highlight on here is you can see the blue section of that graph is showing the emissions from electricity. Those you can see are dramatically declining between 1990 and more recent years. And a lot of that that decline is really attributable to the incorporation of Sonoma Clean Power, the work that they've done with kind of cleaning up the electrical grid in general here locally and providing greener power, as well as a lot of the work that's been done on energy efficiency and just bringing down a lot of the appliance improvements over the last few years. So there you can kind of see that within the building sector, we're really focusing in on how do we get those emissions from natural gas down. Thinking a little bit about the scale of the problem, I think the key thing I wanted to highlight here is if we look at this is just a raw count of number of structures throughout the entire Sonoma County. And you can see that we approximately have approximately 230,000 buildings throughout the county. So that is quite a large number of buildings, each one that needs to be analyzed. Think about the equipment that's in those structures. Think about the energy efficiency within each of those buildings and how each of those those building systems could be changed out over time. That splits down approximately 44% is in the unincorporated areas, 56% in the incorporated areas. The key thing here is really to note approximately 230,000 structures. Looking at that though, that raw number of 230,000, with thinking about how those split out between residential and commercial, you can see that there's approximately 92% of the structures, or well over 90% of the structures are residential. And so even though the commercial buildings may be slightly larger in size, may use actually more energy per square foot because of their more intense uses, when we think about just kind of the scale of the issue and how many total structures we need to look at, really seeing that the bulk of those, over 90%, is in the residential sector, kind of gives us, I think, a strong direction of where our efforts are going to be focused. Thinking about some of the things that can be done to buildings and that this action plan is going to promote is we are thinking about how to upgrade the building systems to move away from natural gas, to use more electricity, and then those appliances, once they're using electricity, can be powered by 100% renewable electricity. And so what we're talking about is upgrading furnaces to heat pump HVAC systems, upgrading hot water heaters to heat pump water heaters, thinking about induction cooktops and electric ovens for cooking, thinking about pools and spas, converting those to heat pump pool heaters. In addition, thinking about installing solar PV systems with integrated battery backup on as many buildings as possible. One key consideration on all of this work is thinking about the electrical panels at each house, at each building, and thinking about whether those panels are large enough at capacity to have this additional work, whether they need to be upgraded, or if there's ability to basically use what's known as watt diet measures, with thinking about either switching gears or creative ways to kind of pack more energy through an undersized panel, but to do that in a safe fashion. A couple of other items that I think that we've obviously talked here about before that integrate with this work is talking about purchasing of electric vehicles and that integration of those vehicles with vehicle to home charging as another option for battery backup. Additionally, kind of two other things that fit in with this work that can be done at the same time that obviously help improve energy efficiency is thinking about the ways that when all of this work is being done, how do we also focus on air sealing, added insulation, repairing ducts, getting high efficiency windows and doors, and or switching out to a cool roof for more added energy efficiency, which just brings down the need for that energy use at all. And the last thing on this slide I wanted to mention was at that same time, if all this work is being done in the house, it is also a very opportune time to think about things like wildfire hardening and seismic safety. Those are some improvements that, even though are not energy or decarbonization related, make a lot of sense if possible to do at that same time. Wanted to speak really briefly about some of the community and stakeholder engagement we've been doing as part of this plan. As I'd mentioned, I presented to this board of directors previously. We've also, as part of our work a year and a half, probably 2 years ago now, through the Climate Protection Initiative, we had a buildings committee that was meeting as part of that, as well as a number of listening sessions we held. And so all of the input from that work was incorporated. We also have our Climate Action Advisory Committee meetings, which meet every other month, and they have received reports on this and provided input on multiple occasions. And then separately, in addition to all of that work, I'd also set up a staff advisory group with made up some members of jurisdictional staff from around the county, as well as setting up some special social equity focus sessions and reaching out to some technical reviewers to take a look at this work in progress. And the last piece we've also done is we've had an online survey running for the last couple months that has gotten a number of responses, and especially useful in that has been the narrative responses that people have submitted, kind of the fill in the blank answers. Just a few highlights, and I don't necessarily need to go through all of these details here. All this information is in the packet, is in the agenda packet. But some of the key concerns we've heard through our feedback sessions, really affordability comes up, affordability and costs come up again and again, specifically for low-income households, for underserved communities, underserved households, but really also for middle-income households. This is not, some of these projects, can be expensive investments that need to be made, and they're not something to be taken lightly. So it's an expensive proposition, no matter what one income level is. Some of the other kind of concerns that people have raised here, worrying about electric rate increases, electric grid reliability, and some other, And then I guess the last one I wanted to highlight in this list at the bottom is also just some older buildings. They need basic improvements first. So all of these nice things like a heat pump and all of these are great additions. But if the building is falling down in the first place, some of those underlying structural issues need to also be addressed. Some of the things we have heard on the positive, though, as part of our feedback, and that we're attempting to integrate into this work as much as possible, is really looking at the partnership model around outreach and education, and specifically around funding, thinking about how we can work much closer with community-based organizations to really kind of think about different kind of turnkey installation services. And also, second to the last here is really thinking about how we can dovetail a lot of this work with the Bay Area Air District's zero emission appliance rules, which are going into effect over the next couple of years. So wanted then to speak for a few minutes about the specific recommendations that are going to be in this report and the focus that we see for our next steps moving forward. So basically, in working through all of this and working with our staff advisory group, we have grouped the recommended actions into these 5 different kind of priority areas. And I'll just go through them very quick. For each of them, we've kind of developed a strategic vision statement, and then there's obviously many more details in the report about the recommended actions. But basically the 5 key areas, talking about policy support. Secondly, talking about community education. Third, a focus on energy equity. Fourth would be a major focus on contractor workforce and education there. And the 5th priority area is specifically making the actual building upgrades, which is where the actual work gets done. But a lot of these preceding steps need to be done before we can really have success on number 5. So this graph is going to be a little bit small on the screen here. All of these graphics are in the packet, but I wanted to talk very briefly, and I wasn't going to go through all of the details of all of these proposed actions, but this is kind of a high-level overview of where you can see at the top, I have the kind of our 5 priority areas listed across the top. Below each of those is the vision statement, and then below each of those is kind of the grouping of the actions. So zeroing in first on priority 1 on policy support is obviously something that SCTCA has a lot of kind of background and experience in. But some of the items within this first section would be looking at legislative and policy efforts, long-term program funding, talking about permit fees and processes, thinking about energy reach codes and work around codes and standards. And then the 5th action there, action 5, is focused on home energy evaluations. And what I wanted to highlight here is given our existing resources, given the existing funding that's available, and just our staffing limitations, there's no way that we can do all of these things all at once, all at the start. So we're kind of figuring out where do we start, and we are proposing to really focus in on action 1 and 2 within this first priority area, and that's really looking at kind of legislative and policy efforts, and then secondly, talking about the long-term program funding, which is obviously something that this board, I think, has talked quite a bit about before in the past, and we have kind of ongoing conversations about that. Moving on then to community education. So there's 3 different actions that are associated here within the community action priority area, community education area. The first is education and outreach partnerships. This is a natural fit for us to be kind of take a lead on, an initial lead on. And then some other actions we've identified that would follow beyond that would be an development of an online resource library, as well as a more involved and in-depth community outreach strategy that would really come as a kind of come out of the work on developing stronger partnerships around the education and outreach. Thinking about energy equity. So again, there's a common theme here. We cannot do all of this work all at the front. So really our focus, I think at the start, would be focusing on the community-based partnerships, figuring out who are the key partners around the county who really should be involved in kind of energy equity conversations. And then thinking about in those next two actions, thinking about developing equity priority services and/or a renter protection programs that could dovetail on with existing kind of renter protections across each of the jurisdictions to think about both how to make these upgrades more affordable and attainable for low-income households, and then also thinking about how to keep residents in those units after they've been upgraded if they're kind of in a renter situation. Moving on next to contractor workforce. This is an area where incredibly important kind of underpinning of all of this work. And this is an area where we've identified there's a lot of work to do. And I think we've also identified that our current staff here are probably not the best ones to actually lead the discussion on the workforce education partnerships, but we're in a perfect position up front to really figure out who are those partners to lead that conversation. We already know of a number of them, but what our hope here on the contractor workforce is to really think about how we can play a role with kind of getting that conversation kickstarted and moving forward, and then allow that one to really be led by some of our other partners. And so that's really then thinking about developing those partnerships, developing training, and then thinking about also some vocational education programs that could be incorporated for high school at the high school and JC level for helping to train. And then moving on to the final section here on the actual building upgrades, I wanted to highlight the fact that a number of these identified actions working on single-family residential, multifamily residential, municipal and public buildings, as well as non-residential commercial. These are all can be assisted by programs that are available through the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. We already partner very closely with BayREN. We are kind of the Sonoma County lead for the BayREN programs here in Sonoma County. And so just wanted to highlight that those are areas where we already have a very nice overlap with the existing work that we're doing and with kind of what needs to happen, happen with next steps. And then I think the one here, the final one I wanted to highlight was talking about kind of in that building upgrade section is that we would take a lead, SCTCA here, we would take a lead on kind of innovative program design and evaluation. A lot of this would be working with BayREN, working with Sonoma Clean Power, working with some of our other partners, and thinking about what are those next generation of programs, that next type of programs that we could be creative with. As I've been doing research on this report, there's quite a number of ideas of creative things that are being done in other communities that I think could be done here, but they need to be carefully thought out before we need to jump into any of those. So I think the last thing I wanted to speak about, and then I could take any questions, was just talk really quickly about our next steps. I presented to our Climate Action Advisory Committee on Friday, presenting to you here today, and we'll be presenting to our members and partners at the end of the month in a couple of weeks. I'm working this week to wrap up our administrative draft of this report. That will then be reviewed by our staff advisory group and our equity and technical advisors throughout July and August, with the intent to come back here to seek approval from this board in September, and then move on to the near-term implementation of those tasks that I identified in those other graphs or in that diagram, and to begin that later this fall and continue into next spring. So with that, I want to thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the robust presentation. Appreciate it. So yeah, happy to open it up to questions from my fellow directors. Director Giudice.
Yeah, thank you very much for that report. Turning to page 123 in our packet, the emissions trends by year. I noticed a pretty sharp decline in 2020 and another one in 2022 and would note that that was during COVID. Do we have any more recent data?
We have not, our most recent, inventory that we've completed was looking at 2022 data. So we have not updated since the 2022 year. And we would be potentially looking to update those values next year.
And that would be 2024 or 2023?
We would actually, you know what, it would actually be about 18 months from now, and then we would look into updating, we would update for the 2024 numbers.
And then going to page 8 on your, or slide 8 on your presentation.
Yes.
That was the priority areas. You could get it back up there.
Oh, here, should I still, but I can go back.
Director Giudice, which slide number did you want?
8.
This one's not working. You click.
Almost there. Oh,
No,
Forget me.
keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, the numbers are different in this packet.
it's 8 in the bottom of the, yeah, on your presentation, not our packet.
I moved a couple of the slides,
2 more.
but keep going
No,
forward.
That's
Keep going.
17.
Keep going. Yeah, but I changed.
They're just out of
There it
order.
is.
it is. Okay, all right, so on 1, 3, and 5, on policy support, energy equity and building upgrades, obviously, I mean, every city or most cities have a general plan. And those 3 key components are embedded either in our climate element or racial, social, and environmental justice element, which quite honestly, you really can't separate the 2 issues. So I'm just wondering, on a support basis, what can we do as an organization to support perhaps those smaller jurisdictions that don't have the staff to produce either a climate element or an element on racial, social, environmental justice? Because once it's baked into into the general plan, that's the playbook for the city, and those jurisdictions would find it a lot easier as items come on their agendas, right, to support the findings by referencing the general plan and start to do some of that work. And that's what we're doing in terms of our building upgrades, et cetera. We just, in your general plan, you have goals and then you have policies to support those goals. And so just curious, do we provide support, or where are we with all of that?
Well, let's see, on this item, I think there's, looking at it, looking up and looking down. So a lot of the things that are initially on my mind around this item are thinking about the way we here at the county level can influence kind of regional or state policy issues. Looking then back down with the jurisdictions, we are currently, through our climate action tracker that we've developed, we are cataloging all of the climate action plans that have been done. Those include a lot of the, in some cases, it references the general plan sections in addition to the climate action plans. And I think that that's for each of these priority areas and each of the actions that are identified, there is then the next level of detail, which will be in the final report, which tiers up from those climate action plans, and where I'm actually referencing some of the documents that are the more local, the climate action frameworks, the climate action plans, and kind of looking at how do we build the synergy between what we're doing here at the countywide level and then getting the communication going up and down.
Yeah, I'll give you a for instance. So I think in a couple of months, we're going to give an update to this organization on what's going on with our climate element and our element on racial, social, and environmental justice. And I don't know if Cloverdale or Sonoma or Sebastopol or some of the other smaller cities have the staff or not the wherewithal, but I'm happy to give it to everybody and have them just cut and paste, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to affect solutions on the local jurisdiction level to help those jurisdictions, implement those policies that are going to make a huge difference and continue to get those numbers to tumble. So does Tanya provide, or do we provide any support to those jurisdictions? Maybe it's a better question for James. Maybe I'm not saying the question right.
So as I understand it, you are asking if we're able to help jurisdictions that don't have their own climate action plans or
With
maybe haven't
policy,
been able to
correct.
update them. And I would say yes. BC actually facilitates a bi-monthly meeting that we call our members and partners meeting where we share information. And there's probably more that we could be doing. And I think our intention with this action plan is to get the framework in place and then work with all of the jurisdictions, especially those who don't have the resources necessarily to figure out how can we share and leverage what other
Perfect.
jurisdictions put in place. So yeah, definitely.
Which we are
do
currently
that.
doing that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then finally, on the construction workforce, I mean, obviously, we should reach out to our union friends in the trades, and of course, North Bay Builders Exchange, et cetera, et cetera. And just one final comment with regards to Bayren. Do we kind of try to mold them a little bit to kind of hit that sweet spot, which would be the reduction, offering programs to reduce the use of natural gas, et cetera, since when you look at these numbers, that's such a big part of, what was it, 70% of it was all coming from natural gas. Do we say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you had a program that did X?
I think that I'm not as involved with the conversations at the county, at the regional level with Bayren, but I do think that there is a kind of a robust process where new programs are introduced and proposed and then adopted. And I think the one thing that comes to my mind is, I think even within Bayren and that whole realm within the last few years, there has been a dramatic switch to where now fuel switching and moving people away from natural gas is now feasible. 5 years ago, the incentives couldn't be used. So even like watching the programs are evolving as I think the needs have become a little bit more kind of articulated. So, sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Director Lands.
Sure. So my understanding, there are kind of two things that come to my mind. One is thinking about transfer switches that basically allow for a multiple appliances to run on a shared circuit where one will have predominance over another, where you can have, so you basically with a 100 amp panel, you can actually have 200 amps of appliances plugged into it, but it kind of knows that if this appliance is running, it will lock these out. And I think there are whole mechanisms that are, or kind of strategies that are associated with that, that has to do with kind of putting in sub panels and things like that, and just being much more creative about the way things are wired together and with some automated controls that are in there.
Having prices up, which I love these ideas, but now you put the construction portion of it. The back of that came out at $106,000 and over 300 watts.
I currently don't have any pricing information kind of like here. That is a key thing that is becoming available through, I think, both Sonoma Clean Power and through Bayren. And a lot of this work is actually providing not fixed costs, but kind of more, yeah, it's the back of it. If you're going to, it's kind of that estimate to give people some just an idea of what the cost may be associated with.
And I think that's going to be a key. I don't think anyone's against it, just making it realistic.
Yes.
If you're having Thanksgiving, now you can't use your oven and your stove at the same time, or induction ovens, or you can't run your heater and your stove at the same time. Things like that you
Right.
Think about. And if you do get the ability to upgrade all safe and affordable, the permitting process is ridiculous. As a contractor, you're 8 to 12 months before PG would even allow you to have a panel big enough to carry this, and that panel the size of a whole time. So it's just, how do we make it work realistically, residentially, low income, make it a fair and affordable for everyone.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And we'll go to public comment on this item. If there's members of the public wishing to make comment, please, we'll start in person. Anyone, please approach the podium. Seeing none. Do we have anybody on Zoom who'd like to make comment? Okay, great. So before we Any additional feedback we'd like to provide on this report? Okay, I'll just make one comment. I know that with the California Restaurant Association lawsuit and City of Berkeley, a lot of cities, including Healdsburg, we are no longer actively implementing kind of the priority reach code, and I know in a number of jurisdictions as well. And so I know one of the priorities is around, the legislative work, but it seems as though that the state legislature certainly is not moving in this direction. In fact, they don't want to update the building code, period. Or who knows if that's going to advance, but it seemingly is where we're headed. So it doesn't seem like the legislative wins in Sacramento are certainly in favor of taking some of these steps, but it does seem as though that there's opportunities for people to opt in and to educate the community, and especially, developers, architects, those who are making these construction decisions kind of on paper before they come to cities. So I think that this is great that we're continuing to push this effort forward, but I think also knowing that the political headwinds are not necessarily, and I mean, obviously not to even mention the federal headwinds, but from the state level. So I think the more we can do in looking at our GHG inventory and just getting really proactive about kind of the biggest bang for our buck. So we're not spreading ourselves too thin as an agency, but really highlighting some of those priority issues that are going to help us with the largest GHG reductions. I think this is a great effort, and I think educating the public as well is a key component of it, because most folks don't even know that their home is like a car that has emissions, because we're burning fossil fuels to keep it running. And so I think just continuing to try to educate the community about what it actually means, not to mention the fuels that you're burning inside your home, at your stove or at your fireplace, and the emissions that we're breathing. So keep up the great work. Thank you for the report. Anything else before we move on? Okay, all right, thank you so much. Our next item is item 5B, which is a planning item. We have the mascots plan and a report from Dana.
Good afternoon, directors. I am pleased to be presenting the draft recommendations from the mascots effort, which is the Marin Sonoma Coordinated Transit Service Plan. The 9 participating agencies, which are 6 transit operators and 3 funding agencies, are represented on the logos here. And this is a collective partnership to advance the cost-effective transit ridership recovery and growth in the North Bay. Here we go. All right. So we introduced this effort to the board last fall with some initial findings, and I'll now be giving an overview of the effort as a whole and the key findings from the existing conditions analysis, and then I'll be presenting the draft recommendations and next steps. So first, a reminder of what mascots is. We embarked on this effort last year to comprehensively evaluate transit in the 101 corridor, where there's overlapping transit service. It's an opportune time because this type of comprehensive assessment has not been done since SMART came into service and since the pandemic changed travel patterns. The effort is focused on transit services along the 101 corridor and primarily the regional services, and it's grounded in post-pandemic travel and work patterns. There's 3 primary goals, which are to grow ridership by improving service efficiency, effectiveness, and legibility along Highway 101 corridor to better serve existing and future transit customers. To work as if we were one agency, so approaching planning as an operator-neutral exercise to determine what services best serve existing and future riders. And to develop a plan, not a study. Mascots will directly inform service changes. So this was a process grounded in data and intended to be near term, something that could feasibly be implemented next year, not a long-term visionary project. We started last summer with gaining a deep understanding of current ridership and travel patterns. We hired a consultant with the support of MTC to get an objective third-party perspective on service in the corridor. Last fall and winter, we developed a series of solutions that were thoroughly discussed with staff and the general managers. We also conducted a technical evaluation of the options that all informed the recommendations that you'll see here today. We are coming to you as we launch the public engagement to get input on the recommendations, and our goal is to adopt final recommendations this fall and implement in early 2026. So I'm not going to review in detail the findings from the first phase, but wanted to cover some of the key findings that are the foundations of the recommendations. So SMART has replaced Golden Gate Transit 101 as a predominant passenger choice for regional intra-Sonoma and Sonoma to Marin County trips. Route 101 is redundant with SMART in Sonoma County throughout much of the day, and there are gaps in SMART's schedule. Highway 101 in Southern Marin is overserved with too many bus routes carrying too few riders, which is inefficient and can cause customer confusion. And most travel to San Francisco originates in San Rafael or areas further south. Local services could have stronger, more direct connections to feed SMART. So in developing the service proposals to respond to these findings, there were a few key themes that to accomplish our goals. First, reduce duplication, more frequency on fewer options, which aids rider understanding and usability of the network. It also optimizes the use of resources by removing overlapping services, which may be redundant. Second, improve connections. Improved frequency can also improve connections between services. Finally, put service where ridership potential is the greatest. This means removing low ridership segments and repurposing those resources in areas where ridership demand is higher. So the biggest move of Mascot's recommendations are that currently SMART and Golden Gate duplicate each other between Santa Rosa and San Rafael, and this is not an optimal use of resources. The recommendation is to discontinue Route 101 north of Novato, where ridership is the weakest and SMART ridership is growing rapidly. To accomplish this and still provide riders adequate service, we do need to increase SMART service span and frequency. So the Mascot's recommendation would be to go from 42 weekday trips to 48 and from 16 weekend trips to 24 on SMART. This will achieve evenly spaced, at least hourly frequency all day on weekdays and weekends to backfill the 101 service. Mascot's recommendation represents a 14% increase in weekday service and a 50% increase in weekend service for a total of 19% increase in SMART service. The Golden Gate resources saved will be reinvested in more Golden Gate 101 service between Marin County and San Francisco, which you'll recall is the area with the greatest demand to San Francisco. This improved frequency also makes it easier for SMART riders to transfer to the 101 at the San Rafael Transit Center for trips to San Francisco. And for Sonoma riders, they'll be able to transfer from SMART to the 101 or to the ferry in Marin to reach San Francisco. In Sonoma County, this will be a reduction in span of transit service to the current 101 service, which begins, I believe, at 5 a.m. and goes till midnight. But ridership on those late night trips is very low, and virtually no other agency operates this late in pure areas. It will also require San Francisco bound riders outside of commute service hours to transfer to the 101 at the San Rafael Transfer Center or to the ferry in Larkspur. Consolidating regional service between Novato and Santa Rosa does provide faster, more reliable, and regular connections between Sonoma and Marin counties. So I won't go into detail about the service recommendations in Marin County, but just essentially summarize that they're to streamline service and provide more frequency on the key routes. There's more detail here if you want to take a look at it after. So with SMART as the main line connection along 101 in Sonoma and Marin and between the two counties, it becomes even more important to make strong direct connections from local bus services to SMART stations. So Petaluma Transit, San Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, and Marin Transit should all implement schedule changes and route realignments to make strong direct connections to smart stations. It is worth noting that Sonoma County Transit already rerouted the Route 20 from the Russian River and Sebastopol area to serve SMART directly and has received positive feedback from riders. Petaluma Transit also increased frequency on routes 2 and 11 to 15 minutes, which both feed both smart stations in Petaluma. They made this change just last month. So most local bus changes recommended mascots are designed to be revenue hour neutral, so no additional resources needed there. As far as commuter bus services go, generally they are serving the purposes that they're designed to serve. However, there are some tweaks that are warranted. There are 3 commuter bus services in Sonoma County. The 164 from Petaluma to San Francisco has fairly low ridership, and those hours should be reinvested into more frequent 172 service, which is between San Rosa, Petaluma, and San Francisco. The 172X, which is direct from San Rosa to San Francisco, operates only 2 trips in the peak hours. And combining all 3 of these into one service that operates more frequently will make the service easier to understand and use. This new combined route should stop making local pickups in San Francisco to save time for riders with the longest distance to travel. And it will offer greater frequency in the later morning, greater frequency altogether, and then a later morning and an earlier afternoon trip with that reallocation of resources. And during the peak of the peak times, this would be a 15-minute service under the plan. There's a relatively minor recommendation on the Route 580, the all-day Golden Gate Transit service that serves the East Bay, to streamline in Marin County to speed up travel time. And so to summarize the recommendations, there's 5 core recommendations. For SMART and Golden Gate Transit 101, to discontinue the 101 north of Novato and increase frequency between San Rafael and San Francisco, to increase SMART frequency and extend span. For Southern Marin bus service, streamline routes between San Rafael, Marin City, Sausalito, and San Francisco. For local bus connections to SMART, for all the local bus operators to make strong direct connections to SMART. For Golden Gate commuter routes in Sonoma, combine into a single alignment with improved frequency and restrict San Francisco local travel to reduce travel times. For Golden Gate Route 580 in San Rafael, follow the 580X alignment. And to summarize the new post-mascot service structure along 101, including what roles each service is intended to provide, SMART becomes the primary Sonoma Marin regional service provider. Golden Gate provides all-day express service from key ridership hubs along Highway 101 in Marin County. Golden Gate provides peak commuter bus service from Marin and Sonoma counties direct to San Francisco. Golden Gate provides strong ferry connections to and from SMART to connect riders to San Francisco. And Marin Transit provides local service along Highway 101 and connections to regular SMART ferry and Golden Gate services. So for customers, that means the network is easier to understand and therefore use. More frequency makes every line more useful and makes connections easier. Improved regional connections with better SMART service and more usable and understandable service into San Francisco from the highest demand areas. And most regional trips will have lower fares than the current fares. A simpler, more frequent network that has better connections will increase ridership. However, there are riders that will be impacted by these changes. The vast majority of the riders will have comparable or better alternative that will get them to their destination at the same time of the day and with comparable or faster travel times. A small number of riders will need to change the time of day they travel or stop, or where they stop. Sorry, or where they access the bus stop. So Route 101 riders in Sonoma County, the current riders will have to take SMART instead of the 101. And SMART will expand their frequency and span to offer regular hourly service all day so that most riders should have a comparable option to their current route. Travel time is comparable or faster on SMART within Sonoma and Marin. And to get to San Francisco, riders can transfer to the 101, which will be running more frequency and easier to transfer to, or transfer to the ferry as they do today. With the transfer, travel times into San Francisco are still comparable to taking the 101 the whole way. For commuter routes in Sonoma, 172X and 164 will be replaced by higher frequency 172 service. And travel times will be comparable or faster than they are today because those buses will no longer make local pickups in San Francisco. And with the opening of the narrow and the HOV lanes will also speed up travel times for these buses. So for transit operators, these changes are projected to increase ridership by 8 to 15%. Those increases vary by location and operator, but overall the number of trips made on transit is projected to increase. Ridership increases are the highest on SMART and Golden Gate 101 in South Marin. And the bus changes were designed to be revenue hour neutral, so should not require significant new resources. No major capital improvements are needed to implement mascots. And the recommendations do require more resources to increase SMART service frequency to backfill the span, backfill the 101 service. We will have to do our due diligence on rider communication and outreach to ensure riders understand the changes and are able to easily access alternatives available to them. So the overall timeline for this plan, public outreach is anticipated to begin later this month and go through August. This presentation will be brought and has started to be brought to boards and committees of all the participating agencies during this timeframe. And a final document with any changes from rider survey input will be brought to the agency boards with the greatest changes for adoption this fall. This is intended to be a 3-year pilot, which would begin in spring of 2026 and would be evaluated along the way with a comprehensive evaluation after the first 2 years. So public outreach will be a joint effort between all participating agencies, and a consultant through MTC will be working with staff on outreach, and which will include a public survey, various pop-up events, and meetings. The survey will be highly focused on transit riders who are currently riding these routes. The survey and information about public meetings and events will be posted on the project website, which is now live at mascotsplan.org. And with that, happy to take any questions and comments.
Thank you. You guys have been busy. This is wonderful to see all the progress being made. Do we have any questions from my fellow directors? Director Lowe.
Thank you. Was there any look at doing a streamlined bus service from East County, I know my friend in West County, to Petaluma for the SMART? Because like, for example, I took Golden Gate Ferry last week at 7:55 ferry. It was packed, by the way. But you know, it's still a drive. And I looked at the option of taking SMART, but there's like 20 stops, or I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of stops. Is there any way you guys took a look at maybe just doing a SMART run from Sonoma, like Sonoma Plaza to Petaluma, maybe a few stops in the same vein that you looked at some of the San Francisco not doing all these stops and so forth, to perhaps encourage ridership from the parts of the county that are not on the 101?
Yeah, so the study was really focused on the 101 corridor. There are recommendations included in the study to better serve regional transit for local bus operators, but that's really, it's been focused more around those times where the bus just misses the train connection or where you would need a transfer to get all the way to the station and trying to streamline some of that. It focused less on kind of those longer connections to the train and streamline those.
Yeah, understood. And I just think sort of, it would also help with some of the traffic on Highway 37. You know, if there were other options to get to Petaluma and then on Smart, which is also, you know, a troublesome corridor, as we all know. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you want to go first.
Director Hinton?
Yeah, my question was just my experience with having commuted on Smart versus buses. That Smart's generally speaking, I mean, I haven't commuted in a while, but a lot more expensive. So was that addressed at all for, because I didn't see anything about differential, just more about efficiency.
Yeah, so comparing Smart fares to Golden Gate fares, Smart is actually less expensive for most trips. And, you know, this is with the current fare structure. Smart did reduce their fares quite a bit, kind of around the pandemic years. There was the only situation where, you know, we saw a slight increase in fares, looking at all of the changes in how people would have to travel would be for people who are paying cash and taking and transferring and not getting a transfer credit. So if people are using Clipper on Golden Gate, they're getting a discount for using Clipper and they are getting a transfer credit. So if you're taking Smart to say San Rafael and then transferring to 101 to get into San Francisco, you're going to get on Clipper, you're going to get that discount and that fare transfer credit. So for most passengers, their fares would actually go down using Smart.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Director Touche.
It's okay. Yeah, so, I mean, Smart's hitting a home run. And so the vision here is to get folks to the 101 corridor and then get them up and down at Smart. Having said that, Golden Gate Bridge will be truncating the majority of its services at either San Rafael or at Novato. The unfortunate thing about this whole process with mascots was that the $5 million that was taken away from Golden Gate Bridge, only 900,000 of it is going to Smart. And I think a majority of that money should have been, am I correct on that? I believe it's 900,000.
Yeah, you're fairly close. We will be having a future item later this fall to get into the details of the numbers. But the 5 million is based on projections that were the fiscal year 25 projections. If you look at the fiscal year 26 projections, are substantially less. So it's less than 5 million, but
And it's tied into the dynamic formula that goes on down. Yeah, understood. So having said that, I think it would really help communities like Sonoma, like Sebastopol, and the outlying regions if we could dedicate more service to getting those folks to the 101 corridor and then up and down the Smart line. And yeah, GGB and Smart have been working to coordinate service at the Larkspur terminal. Really, the losers in all of this are the late night service for right now, because what happens is after GGB was running till midnight or whatever it was, or 1 a.m, I think, I'm not sure. But the Smart service is not going to go that late. So if you want to get from San Francisco to Santa Rosa, that is not going to be possible. And the other potential thing that's going to be affected is our, I'm speaking on behalf of GGB, is the paratransit component to this as well. So that needs to be thought through. So we had a robust discussion about this at the board of directors meeting last month, and we're in favor of this. But I just think that the majority of the money should have gone to Smart. because that is the vision and that's, so having said that, that's it. That's just my personal soapbox. But thank you. And thank you for the report. And I think it's a step in the right direction. It absolutely is a step in the right direction. We need to be consolidating these services. But I think the vision needs to be smart, smart, smart. We need to focus on smart.
Thank you. I concur. Anyone else on the board? Okay, we'll take it to public comment. Anyone in person for public comment? Seeing none, and we'll go to Zoom for public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and bring it back. And so this is just receive the report, no action. Any final comments on this? Nope. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate the report. And now we'll move on to 5C with Chris Barney. This is the Vehicle Miles Traveled Mitigation Program for Sonoma County. And this is a draft recommendation report and an action item. So we'll consider approving the staff recommendation to continue to evaluate a VMT exchange with SCTCA as the program administrator, as outlined in this report. Welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vice Chair Kelly and directors. So I'm joined here today by Ian Barnes and Kelly Bond from Fair and Peers. And together we'll provide an update on the SCTCA VMT mitigation program project. So I'm going to walk through an introduction and then turn things over to Ian and Kelly to cover a lot of the details. And then I'll walk through next steps and the staff recommendation. And thank you, Vice Chair Kelly, for walking through the recommendation. We'll be providing a lot of information today and just want you to keep in mind that there's a lot of additional work that still needs to happen. And we're recommending that we continue to test and evaluate the VMT mitigation framework. So it looks like we are up. So why are we focused on vehicle miles traveled? So one reason is reducing VMT is a goal in our comprehensive transportation plan. And vehicle miles traveled is intimately connected with our greenhouse gas emissions. By reducing VMT, we can reduce our emissions, improve safety, reduce congestion, and reduce wear and tear on our transportation infrastructure. So a lot of good reasons to be focused on VMT. Changes to the California Environmental Quality Act also have really focused in on vehicle miles traveled. So you may have heard of Senate Bill 743, which made measuring VMT and VMT impacts a requirement as part of the project environmental review process. So SB 743 eliminated level of service or delay as a CEQA metric and focused on VMT as a determinant of transportation-related environmental impacts. So every project that requires a CEQA analysis needs to potentially consider VMT. This changes where significant impacts may occur and changes the mitigation focus from congestion reduction to VMT reduction. And SB 743 was implemented in 2020. So we've been working on this since then. And prior to that, through 2013, when SB 743 was passed at the state legislature. So I'll touch really briefly on what VMT is. I believe Kelly is going to get into a little more detail. But one thing to keep in mind is VMT measures the total amount of vehicle travel across a system or region. So it's really a big picture look at transportation impacts on our transportation system and communities versus level of service, which really looked at congested areas in specific locations. So let's move on to the VMT analysis process for a development project at a local jurisdiction. So when a development project comes to a local jurisdiction, the first thing that happens is the lead agency determines if VMT impacts need to be analyzed at all. So some small projects or those near high quality transit stations like smart stations or in low VMT areas don't need to be analyzed at all. They can be screened out. If a project isn't screened out, the project sponsor will need to calculate what the VMT impacts are of the project. Those VMT calculations are then compared to thresholds. So the state has recommended thresholds for certain types of projects, and most of your jurisdictions have actually set local thresholds for VMT impacts as well. So if there is determined to be an impact, that needs to be mitigated. So a number of years ago, we developed a VMT reduction and mitigation calculator to help quantify the effectiveness of those mitigation measures. But we have heard from your local staff that a lot of times the VMT impacts can't be mitigated on site. So there's a need for off-site VMT mitigation. So we actually applied for and received funding through the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program to develop recommendations for some sort of VMT mitigation program for our county. So we're investigating potential VMT impact mitigation program ideas in cooperation with your staff and regional agencies and transit providers. And this project has been guided by a project TAC made up of your engineering staff, planning staff, transit provider staff, and also representatives from state and regional agencies like MTC and Caltrans, along with our legal counsel. There are a lot of legal issues to kind of work through when you're talking about CEQA mitigation. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Kelly and Ian to walk through some of the details for their initial recommendations.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly. I'm with Fair and Peers. I live in Petaluma and I work at our Petaluma office. Excited to be here in front of you all today. So just diving into the content of the presentation here, I'll start off with just the project goal. So let's see. All right, great. The primary goal for this project is to identify ways for land development projects in the county, as Chris stated, to mitigate their VMT impacts. So the potential program would help to provide a more cohesive approach to VMT mitigation actions by expanding options to a county-wide scale versus at a local scale. As Chris also mentioned, we did form a technical advisory committee. It's comprised of city and county staff and other local stakeholders that helped shape the program. You can see here is just an overview of the project itself and kind of where we're tracking. So we're actually now in July, but if you see the stars there, we are about 2/3 of the way through the project. We have worked with and met with the TAC several times. We've also completed a number of stakeholder workshops and interviews, and we have drafted the report that was provided to you all. And so we're going to update that report based on feedback we received today, as well as feedback we received from the PAC and the TAC that we recently presented to through SCTCA. And we'll also be hosting a second demonstration workshop later this summer. And so that will also inform the draft report. Okay, so just a little more information on VMT. Chris shared some of this already, but just a little image here to kind of help on a very basic level break down what VMT is. So vehicle miles traveled is a measure of the total amount of driving happening in an area, as Chris shared. And it doesn't matter how many people are in the car. If one car is driving 10 miles, it's 10 VMT. If there are 4 separate cars that go 10 miles, it's 40 VMT. So that's what you're seeing on the screen. And as Chris also stated, recent changes in state law have required that cities and counties use this to measure and evaluate new development. Okay, so VMT, how is it reduced? It can be reduced through a combination of different strategies that are on the slide. At the project level, it could be through site design and local context that play a role. At the community level, improvements in public transportation and infrastructure help to shape the travel behavior. And at the regional level, land use planning and large-scale transportation programs contribute to long-term reductions. So the proposed VMT mitigation program that we're talking about falls under that regional and program measures bucket. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk briefly about the different program options and where we are kind of landing on. So several different ways to mitigate VMT, as I just shared, and these can be categorized into 3 different buckets. You'll see on the top there, capital improvements, which think about physical infrastructure like a transit service expansion for a new route. So in the photo, someone's adding a new bus stop in front of some new housing there that's gone in. Services is a second type of category. Things like transit, expanding the hours, which we just heard about through mascots or how often frequently things are coming. And then finally, programs is the third bucket. So things like subsidized transit passes could fall into that category. And so these different types of actions fall under different program option types. So on the bottom there, you'll see there's bank, exchange, and fee-based, depending on the type of change. And so one thing to note is fee-based is specific to capital improvement projects. So I'll just share a little bit more about kind of the trade-offs of each of these different ones, kind of the background of how we landed on what we landed on. So an impact fee program, you'll see that on the bottom left there, is pretty familiar, easy to understand. It has a lower administrative burden, but it can only fund future capital improvement and projects, which I just shared. A VMT exchange program is a bit more flexible, has a moderate administrative burden to maintain a list of VMT mitigation projects. It can fund all three types, capital improvement services and programs, but one applicant, one developer must fully fund a mitigation action themselves. They can't split it up between different projects. So that kind of limits a little bit of the flexibility there. And then lastly, a VMT bank, you'll see on the top right. It is flexible in the types of projects it can deliver, but it has the greatest administrative burden. So you can split funding between applicants. So a single transit route expansion that cost could be shared across multiple developments. And it can also fund capital services and programs, all three types. And so we are moving forward looking at a VMT exchange. It is, like I kind of shared, the administrative burden was taken into consideration, kind of a moderate burden versus a more intense bank. And the task of maintaining the list of projects, just thinking about staff and who's going to be doing that. So we are moving forward, exploring the exchange. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian. All right.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon. Ian Barnes, Principal Engineer with Fair and Peers in our Petaluma office. So we're going to go through a high-level example about how a VMT exchange would operate. There are 9 steps, some of which the earlier pieces are partially complete through the effort that we're completing now, with the middle portion being defined through an upcoming implementation phase, as discussed in the staff report. The latter stages would bridge the implementation through the project initiation, as well as the operations. I'm just also noting that this is a framework. We're defining these steps as part of this work now. Future agreements between the administering agency like SCTCA and local agencies will help to add the details in the future. So the full program initiation, as you might imagine, would only occur once. The day-to-day operations focus on those middle steps. And when the mitigation list gets low or runs out of projects, it'll be updated and the process starts again with the mitigation action list development. We'll illustrate this a little bit here in this demonstration. Just wanted to note that the VMT monitoring steps are needed for CEQA purposes, but the scope and cadence of those steps will be defined in agreements during the implementation phase. So step 1 is the program initiation. So a VMT exchange agent, which is the administering agency, is established by allocating the funding and approvals to form a VMT mitigation program, developing governing documents in conjunction with its partner agencies, and again, the legal agreements between the VMT exchange agent and its participants. Step 2 is the mitigation action list development. In this example here, the administering agency, or SCTCA, sorry, after 20 years, it's taken a little while to get used to. So SCTCA, along with any partner agencies, will develop a list of mitigation actions. Up here we have 3 in this example, to include in the initial program. This work would be performed and overseen by a VMT mitigation action review team, which is a third-party entity charged with providing oversight of the VMT mitigation selection and the evaluation process. This would be a multidisciplinary group that could be housed within SCTCA or operate independently. The third step is to quantify the reductions in costs. of those mitigation measures. So in this case, the exchange agent evaluates each of these sample actions to determine the cost to implement and to quantify the VMT reduction potential. Participating agencies or other partner agencies would have the ability to weigh in on that process going forward. So that's the initial setup of the program. Now we get into how the program really works to mitigate CEQA impacts for VMT at the local jurisdiction level. So step 4, let's say we have a lead agency for a development project that identifies the VMT reduction needed. That lead agency then approves or delivers that project and contacts the VMT exchange agent. So the lead agency, the city or town, determines the project's mitigation needs. Now, the first development is going to get their choice of all the actions in the bank and will likely choose the one that offers the lowest cost option for VMT reduction. So over time, this list should be refreshed in order to make sure that there's a wide spectrum of VMT reduction options going forward. The lead agency, is determining the project's mitigation needs. And then at this point, development 1 pays into the exchange agent for action 2 and gets the amount of VMT reduction needed to offset their impact. So after that step is done, the mitigation action gets implemented. The exchange agent then evaluates each action to confirm CEQA additionality and the VMT reduction. So this is a really important step for CEQA to make sure that, but for the funding that's coming through the exchange program, that mitigation, happens. So the administering agency also needs to verify that the mitigation actions are resulting in those real and verifiable VMT reductions. So step 8, monitoring and reporting. The exchange agent monitors the VMT performance of the various actions and reports back to the board. And then finally, the mitigation list gets updated periodically in consultation with partner agencies to update the list of VMT mitigation strategies in the capital improvements, services, or programs bucket. So it's a living process. You don't just set it up once and then forget it, but there's the opportunity to bring into new strategies as local policies go forward. And with that, for next steps, I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Kelly and Ian. So moving on to our next steps. So we've included a link to the recommendations document in the board packet. I would say it's a pretty robust report, over 400 pages, but a lot of that is appendices. So if you want to just focus on the first 50 or 60 pages, that includes the body of the recommendations and report. And there's also a conclusions and recommendations section. So that's a good place to kind of get the highlights along with the executive summary. Here's a look at the outline of the report. So encourage you to take a look at that or point your staff in that direction as appropriate. So with the draft recommendations report out now, Kelly mentioned moving into the next phase and a second workshop where we test out the framework that Ian walked through with some example projects to see how it would work, kind of stress test the framework. So we'd actually evaluate how projects needing VMT mitigation could implement different VMT reduction items like transit improvements, travel demand management programs like bike share expansion and commute rewards programs, and free or discounted fares. We've also looked into affordable housing as VMT reduction, but concurrently the state is looking at a statewide affordable housing VMT reduction program. So we're going to be focusing on transportation specific VMT reductions as part of the countywide program and watch where things go as part of the state action. So we'll be working with your staff as part of that second workshop and doing that walkthrough and reporting out. As Kelly mentioned, we'll take the information we learned from that workshop and comments we've received on the draft recommendations to refine the final report. So once we release the final report, which we're planning on bringing to you at by the end of this year, we'll come to the end of our currently funded work and the end of our contract with Fair and Peers. So I mentioned the Sustainable Communities Grant from Caltrans that has funded most of this work. So once that final report's released, we need to find additional resources to do all of these future steps on the slide here, including developing program governance structures and a guidance document, developing a plan to fund the administrative costs of the program. So someone's going to need to oversee the program, identify those mitigation measures, and line everything up. We've established some clear criteria for mitigation actions in the program. So we've done a little bit of the work on these next few bullets, but we need to dial that in for the final program. And we also need to establish legal agreements with program participants, including local jurisdictions, those implementing the mitigations and things like that. Monitoring and reporting is also very important. So we need to develop tools and processes for doing that, conduct secret review on the program, and then finally fund and initiate the program. So a lot to still do. We have a program we'd like to continue to investigate. So with that, our final recommendation is to continue to evaluate a VMT exchange with SCTCA as program administrator as outlined in the draft VMT mitigation banking and exchange program report that we presented today. We took this information to the Technical Advisory Committee and Planning Advisory Committee. They both are also forwarding that recommendation onto you as board members. One thing I would note is that directing us to continue to evaluate the program and approving the final document later this year doesn't obligate SCTCA or local jurisdictions to participate in a potential VMT mitigation program. So that would be voluntary once we have something in place. And we need to work out participation as part of that legal review and developing those legal agreement processes. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things back over to you, Ms. Vice Chair.
Thank you. It's great to see the progress on this. I know it's been many months since we first had the presentation and kind of the conceptual proposal. Directors, any questions? Director Giudice?
Yeah, if you're looking for a test kitchen, come on down to Roanoke Park. We're getting ready to build a downtown, and I think a big part of the solution there or mitigation there is going to be our active transportation plan, to be quite honest with you. And so, you know, we're focused around the downtown. So if you're looking for a good example, wanting to highlight a integrated transit-oriented development with affordable housing, I got one for you. This is kind of a really cool, kind of a local cap and trade type concept. So I think it's fantastic. And thank you for the report.
Great. And thanks for the recommendation. We're working closely with your staff. Yep.
Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Anyone in person? Seeing none. Anyone on Zoom? This might be one of our quietest public comment meetings we've ever had. Okay, and directors, any other comments before we do need to take action on this item. So the request is to consider approving the staff recommendation to continue to evaluate this VMT exchange idea.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Director Giudice and a second by Director Lands. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to reports and announcements. So item 6.1, our executive committee report, Director Cameron.
So just to report out on the agenda for the exec committee, we discussed the current agenda for today's July 14th board review. We talked about the updated status for Bay Run's Water Upgrade Save program, as well as our climate and transit ad hocs. And that concludes my report out on the exec committee.
Great. And then any regional agency reports from directors? We'll circle back to that in case Director Giudice wanted to mention. I know our SMART directors, we've had a couple of big milestone moments, including the full funding of SMART to Healdsburg has now been awarded. So that is exciting, and we'll be awarding a contract later this fall for the beginning implementation of that work with the goal of completion into Healdsburg and probably through Healdsburg by 2028. And let's see, any other regional board reports? Okay, And then advisory committee, we did have those agendas in our packets. And then item 6.4.1, which is marketing and communications. Ross? Sorry, really quick before you come up. Did you have any regional agency reports? Anything? Okay, well, sorry, Ross, we'll have you hold the phone and we'll turn it back over to Director Giudice for a Golden Gate Bridge District update.
Thanks. So at the bridge, we're dealing with the same things that you guys are dealing with in terms of chloroforming our initiatives on diversity, equity, and inclusion and complying with ICE. And of course, with the bridge, a big ticket item is at stake, the $400 million to do the seismic retrofit of the bridge, which needs to happen. And so there was quite a robust discussion. And in the middle of that discussion, Director Snyder and I came up with 3 bullet points that say, whereas the district believes every person deserves the right to feel respected and safe within our organization and feel welcome in using our bridge and public transit facilities, and to be afforded opportunities on a fair and equal basis in all transactions involving the district. Whereas the district commits that the board of directors, officers, and workforce show honor, compassion, and the qualities of character that support equal justice for all, and the district values that we hold true. Whereas the district commits our entire workforce to embrace a culture of belonging by building bridges toward one another and creating bonds of connection from empathy and understanding. And we did that as kind of an add-on to a George Floyd resolution we did in 2018. And we're hoping that this is going to, by making it generic enough, hopefully it's going to comply with federal regulations, but still will allow us to move forward with some dignity and honoring those initiatives. You know, it wasn't palatable for all the directors, but it got us across the finish line. And so we chose not to, at this time, go on to the lawsuit and I didn't know this, but we don't have a sworn police force. You know, they're just very good security guards. So unlike other jurisdictions, that really wasn't an option for us. So that's how we dealt with this, and we'll see what happens. But I think it'll just be a matter of time before it's something else that he throws at us to throw it for a twist. But for right now, we feel that grant is safe, and that seismic retrofit needs to happen. When the next earthquake comes, if that bridge were to collapse in any way, that would cause a lot of harm to a lot of people. So, and that's my report.
Thank you. Okay, Ross.
Good afternoon, directors. The following is a brief summary of communications and engagement activities over the past month. SCTCA funding program cycle 2, call for projects. I'm sure David will talk about that some more. But this was announced via email, social media, and the SCTCA website. As part of the continuing rebrand process, the SCTA and RCPA newsletters were combined into one newsletter for the month of June as well as July that just went out, and that will continue that way moving forward. Additional branding updates are currently occurring, and we're hoping to have that wrapped up pretty soon. The MSN Highway 101 ribbon cutting ceremony, just kind of want to give a heads up on that. Staff is partnering with Caltrans and TAM to help plan a ribbon cutting for the entire MSN project. This is tentatively planned for October 3rd. More information on this event will be coming soon, but this is quite the culmination for something that SCTCA has been involved in for quite a long time. And please let me know if you have any questions about these or any other engagement activities.
Thank you. I think any other questions? Okay, no. Director Tanya on climate change. So we're going to get our briefing on climate change activities that took place during June of 25.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Kelly and directors. I will give a brief update on our climate change activities. And you heard a lot about what we've been working on from BC on our equitable building electrification action plan. Has taken a lot of resources over the last number of months. So I'll highlight a couple of our other activities. First, we are partnering with the County of Sonoma on the Equitable EV Charging Plan, and I think I mentioned this at our last board meeting. And this project will develop a countywide plan for EV charging and really focusing in on increasing access to charging in our communities that don't have, their own homes and their own home charging. So multifamily dwellings, for example. So in this last month, we completed our first meeting of our stakeholder advisory group, and this is a group that SCTCA is leading. And this group had a first look at a list of site selection criteria, which the consultants will be using to do a GIS mapping exercise. And they'll be coming back to this stakeholder advisory group probably in late August, early September, to share the results of that initial mapping. And then the advisory group will give additional feedback and recommendations on those recommended sites. So it's going to be an iterative process that we'll be going through. So that's our equitable EV charging plan. And the goal is to have that plan complete by the spring of 2026. So June, actually at the latest. Next, I wanted to give a brief update on the Sonoma Marin Ag and County Climate Coalition, known as the SMAC project. This project was canceled due to the termination of a USDA Climate Smart Commodities grant. The steering committee for the project decided to go ahead and reapply under the new guidelines for the new programs called the Advancing Markets for Producers Initiative, with a goal that the initiative has a goal of providing more funding to the producers. And so the steering committee put together and submitted a new proposal to this program. But because of the reduced scope and changed scope of that program, there's no longer a role or funding for SCTCA in this revised proposal, but I would say there's still interest from the original group of partners who worked on the SMAC project to go after additional funding in the future to complete the full scope of the project, which would include, in the work that we're doing, we were going to integrate the metrics that were going to be coming out of this project around carbon sequestration into our greenhouse gas inventory. And so we'd still like to do that work, but we'll need to find a new source of funding for that. Next, I wanted to give an update on the Water Upgrade Save program, which, as you know, is one of the BayREN programs that we are the lead for. And I've mentioned in the past that we've had real challenges enrolling utilities in the program due to a number of factors. And since we last talked, the city of Cloverdale did decide to exit the program and formally is taking the steps to close out the program. We're working closely with them on that. And then we're expecting this Friday, our BayREN Coordinating Circle, which is the decision-making body for all of the BayREN programs, is meeting this Friday to consider basically the future of the program. And we're expecting the group to look at two different options. One is to close the program completely, which, as you know, would have a big impact on our staff here at SCTCA and our funding, since we do receive a sizable portion of funding from BayREN. And then, so we're fairly confident that the BayREN director will be submitting that proposal to fully close the program. But in the meantime, we feel there are still opportunities that are not met that we can pursue in the water energy nexus space. And so staff, primarily Chris Cohn, our program manager, has been developing a new proposal for a new program design that will focus on a leak repair service. And this new program, as we're envisioning it, would not be a tariff on bill program. So it wouldn't require utilities to sign up under a master agreement and go through the process of putting those charges on bill, which has been a barrier for our utilities, but it will be a direct install program. And so as we're proposing it, we would be administering that program, and leak repair is one of the areas that utilities have consistently shared with us is an area they have challenges meeting the need, especially for low income customers who, if there's a leak in their service line, which is between the meter and the house, those leaks can cost anywhere from, $500 upwards of, $5,000 to repair. And many folks do not have the funds to make those repairs. And so it's a real need in the community that we're seeing. And so that will be the proposal that we're bringing forward on Friday. And by the time of our next board meeting, we'll be able to give an update, if not sooner, on the status of the Water Upgrade Save program. So then in terms of other BayREN programs, we have our Efficiency and Sustainable Energy, or EASE, home program. And I know Anna has talked about that in the past. but did want to let the board know that the pre-qualification for Sonoma County residents has started. And we already have a pipeline of about 100 interested residents in the program. And this is one of the Bay Rent programs that will be able to address some of the electrification and energy efficiency needs that BC highlighted in his update today. And then the actual scheduling portal where folks could go online to see if they're eligible for the program and submit an application will open for our local residents on July 21st. So we'll be getting more information out about that to everyone. And then lastly, in this area, staff is doing outreach through the Housing Authority to reach rental properties because this is a program that renters are eligible for as well. In the multifamily program, unfortunately, the program has been put on pause because they've actually almost run through all of their incentive funds. The demand has been so high for this program. And so while they're working through their existing pipeline of projects and getting those completed before adding new projects to the pipeline. In the commercial program, our business refrigerant replacement program is getting ready for a regional soft launch. And that program does include Sonoma County in that first launch. And so we're starting outreach to eligible businesses, and those would be food service and floral businesses. So stay tuned for more information on that. And then lastly, in the Bay Rent Codes and Standards program, just wanted to highlight that this program has been in the last, I'd say, couple of weeks, really focusing on AB 306, which is the building standards, building regulations, state and local building standards that your board took a position on, an oppose unless amended position because of the impact on our local climate goals. Unfortunately, this bill was incorporated into the budget trailer bill, AB 130, which did pass and was signed by the governor. So AB 306 is essentially in effect in law. And so this impacts only the residential building code. So commercial building code, REACH codes could still move forward. There's a number of provisions in this bill. It's fairly complicated. And I just wanted to let the board know that through BayRen, we are connected to a number of resources, folks who are looking at, there's a number of exceptions, for example, in what was AB 306 and now AB 130, which would allow a jurisdiction to pass a REACH code in the very short term, but it's not entirely clear what those exceptions entail. And so just to let you all know, and we'll certainly be working with your staff, that we have resources available and folks are still trying to figure out exactly what all this means and how big of an obstacle it will end up being. But it is definitely an impact on us in terms of meeting our goals. So we'll definitely keep you posted on how that proceeds. So that concludes my report, and I'd welcome any questions that you all have.
Seems that you've been quite busy. Yes, JV, Director Leap.
That was a rush. That was pretty amazing. I'm looking through my agenda and supporting documentation and stuff, and you said that you would have information on everything you just said. I suppose I can go back and watch the video, but do you have documentation that has everything that you just said in writing?
Yes, and we can certainly either in the activities report or James will send a follow-up email out with some links. And some of the information may not yet be available, but we'll make sure that we get it out to you. For sure.
Okay, great. Make sure my name's on that list.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you so much. And then our next report is our planning report from Steph Britt.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and board members. Here's a brief overview of our current planning activities. For travel demand modeling, updates have been completed with new base year data. Staff are now refining scenarios for Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, including a no growth scenario with continued investment in CTP projects. For SB 743 and VMT mitigation, we've developed a draft recommendations for countywide VMT mitigation program. These were included in today's agenda and will be refined based on your feedback. On the active transportation front, the community-based transportation plans for South Santa Rosa and Central Rohnert Park are moving into phase 2 of outreach. Staff will host community resource fairs at each study area. The Rohnert Park Resource Fair is scheduled for Saturday, August 16th at John Reed Elementary School, and the South Santa Rosa location and date are to be determined, but they will be in late August for back to school. The community feedback received will help shape the final improvement recommendations, and we hope to see you there.
For the comprehensive transportation plan, Sonoma Moves 2050, the project list was finalized and a searchable online version is now available on the CTP update website. The CTP performance assessment is now underway and the results will be presented this fall to the board. Staff are working on updating and developing content for the plan, and we are expecting it to be headed towards fall. And the final strategic transportation demand management plan is now up on the SCTCA website, and we are working on making the final story map available online. For school programs, the Safe Routes to School initiative had a highly successful May, including countywide Back to School Day that saw a 200% increase in student ridership. Safe Routes to School staff has started enrolling schools in the program and planning for the fiscal year 25-26 school year. The Sonoma Commuter Reward Program now has over 1,000 participants and continues to encourage transit, biking, and carpooling, and the Emergency Ride Home program on gosonoma.org. And we continue to support sustainable commuting options for everyone. Finally, we remain deeply engaged in regional planning coordination and topics like transit-oriented communities policy, housing, Vision Zero, and the Plan Bay Area update. Well, thank you. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay,
Right.
thank you. And our last report is from David Ruperta. We're going to talk about some of our capital projects and programming activities.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Directors. Dave Ripper, Director of Projects and Programming at SCTA, and just wanted to give you an update on some of our projects. First project we've been working on for a while now is the Hearn Avenue Interchange project. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it come together, but for those of you that may not be as familiar with it, it's replacing an existing 2-lane overcrossing with a new 4-lane overcrossing over 101. Now, the project will include protected bike lanes and sidewalks throughout the project, and construction began last spring. And at this point, we are on track to open the new overcrossing with all 4 lanes by Thanksgiving, depending on weather and construction progress. Just to give you some photos of the construction progress that has occurred the last few months. Back in March, we erected the new girders for the new overcrossing. Over the last couple of months, we were able to shift traffic entirely to the new northern half of the new overcrossing. That includes looking at in the lower left, you can see the new decorative corbels that have been installed, and along with the continuous sidewalk that is now in place and allowing pedestrians and bicyclists full access. The existing overcrossing had no continuous bike lanes or sidewalks, and so you had pedestrians and bicyclists having to share very limited space on the shoulder. We are working with Caltrans on a change order to add a buffer to the westbound bike lane so that the bike facilities both on the northern part of the bridge and the southern part of the bridge will have full protection from vehicles. Over the weekend of June 20th and 21st, we demolished the original overcrossing that required a full closure of Highway 101 that went without incident. And so now over the last couple of weeks, Caltrans, the contractor, have been doing pile driving for the second half of the overcrossing, which will be completed. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have the pile driving complete. Next project I want to give you an update on is the State Route 116 and 121 intersection improvement projects. This project is replacing the always stop intersection with a new roundabout and also relocating the park and ride lot south of the city of Sonoma. We began construction in the spring of 2024, and we opened up the temporary roundabout configuration in November. And that really helped improve traffic flow for the public. And at this point, we're planning completion by the end of October or early November of 2025. Just to give you some more construction progress photos on the upper right and kind of circling around clockwise. Those are some photos that we've taken over the last couple of months with the center of the roundabout complete. In the upper left is a photo from last week. We're doing some excavation on the local road, Bon Isle Road. The parking slots that were there that were used by the deli were in Caltrans right away, so they're no longer be used. And we're finishing up some excavation work on that corner. Here's a nice overhead shot from a drone from a professional photographer that does a lot for Smart as well. We're really happy with how the project's turning out, and it's been a great partnership with the contractor and Caltrans. One of our newer projects is the State Route 121 8th Street East project. This project is currently in the environmental phase, and they will potentially replace the stop controlled intersection on the side street at 8th Street East with a roundabout or traffic signal. It's a rather complicated project because you have the smart tracks and their Shelville Freight Depot right there next to the project, along with existing warehouse and a lot of wetlands and flooding impacts. And so there's been a lot of coordination with SMART, property owners and tribal consultation as well. And we're working with the county and Caltrans to secure funding for construction. The board previously approved funding for the design phase and the right-of-way phase. And so now all we need is construction funds. Here's the kind of graphic of what the roundabout concept could look like. This is sized to be a single lane roundabout, but it could be expanded in the future to 2 lanes if ever needed. This includes the class 1 bike path along 8th Street East that would go to north up to the city of Sonoma eventually at Napa Road and behind Sonoma's Best Creamery. And then also includes a little bit of the bike path on the south side 121 to eventually connect to the Bay Trail. The traffic signal alternative is a little bigger because you would have to have multiple lanes of storage capacity at the intersection and allow people to accelerate and decelerate as you merge those lanes back down. It has a much larger footprint, and with that larger environmental and right-of-way impacts, that includes potentially having to replace that bridge over Arroyo Seco to the east as you go towards Napa. Right now, there's a construction project with Caltrans to replace the bridge rails on that bridge, along with another bridge south of the 116, 121 intersection at Yellow Creek. Because of fire season, there's a lot of concerns from first responders on the potential one-way traffic control that would be needed to do those projects since there's no shoulders to allow them to shift traffic to replace the bridge rail. So we're actively working with Caltrans, SMART, and first responders to see if we can come up with some solutions that would push that project outside of the fire season and reduce the impacts to first responders and the traveling public. Just to give you an update on some of the planning activities our team is working on. As mentioned earlier, we are working on Vision Zero. As part of that, we have a number of activities happening right now with our fiscal year 23 Safe Streets for All program that I'll go over in a second. However, our fiscal year 24 Safe Streets for All grant is on hold. Given the board direction at last month's meeting, we have entered into litigation that King County, Washington is leading, along with the cities of Roanoke Park, Petaluma, Santa Rosa, and the county. We have all joined that litigation, and we're hoping to receive a favorable outcome to allow us to move forward with that grant. We also recently submitted a fiscal year 25 Safe Streets from Roads for All application to request funds to update all of the local road safety plans for the jurisdictions, including all the cities in the county. And that includes new local road safety plans for the cities of Cloverdale and city of Sonoma. And we should find out about that grant application in the next few months. For the current fiscal year 23 planning we're doing right now from Safe Streets for All funds, a number of activities have been occurring in the last couple of months. We recently completed a speed reduction study in the city of Healdsburg, which the city is putting in place to reduce speed limits in its downtown core. We're also actively working with the city on their Safe Routes to School plan update, including attending a public meeting that will be occurring this Thursday at the community center to get input on some of their Safe Routes to School projects and projects that will be potentially submitting for our funding program later in August. And then also we're working on our Safe Routes to School prioritization criteria and some program updates that we'll be bringing to you in September. Lastly, I want to note that we have also been working as part of that study on the Lakeville Corridor study, and we are doing active public engagement right now, including an event we held at the Petaluma Fair a few weeks ago. We're also developing some concept plans and we'll be rolling that out to the public in the next few months. Lastly, just to close that up with our funding program, the board did approve our call for projects, which we launched back on June 11th. We've been providing consultant technical assistance to the local agencies to help with their applications. That's been provided on a first come, first served basis with our 6 different consultant teams spread out to try to help out as best we can. And we have over 50 applications that are receiving technical assistance right now. Applications are due to us on August 8th, and we're happy to work with your staff on any questions or any input they need on their applications. And as part of that, once we get the applications in, we'll be looking at them to see which are the best projects to fit for the 2026 State Transportation Improvement Program funding recommendations that will be coming to you also in September. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed it when you said how many projects are being given technical support?
Over 50 right now.
Okay, great. Directors, any questions? Director Rogers? And then you're next.
How are applications, when you do the call for fundings and they come in, how are the applications reviewed?
So we will receive all the applications, and once we do the initial review for the early tranche of funding that we have this fall, we will be doing volunteer teams composed of staff and volunteers from local jurisdictions to review and score all the applications based on our scoring criteria. That review will probably occur in the spring of 2026.
Okay, so some of the feedback that I have been receiving is that the applications are very cumbersome and they are very long. And that is coming from my staff. And so I know with some of the smaller jurisdictions that we can multiply that maybe by 10 or 20 for them to get applications in. So it would be nice if in the future we can look at maybe streamlining some of the applications. I can speak for Santa Rosa and say that we are having some challenges, and so that is going to be reflective in our staffing. And so it would be nice if we can still apply, but also not have it weigh so heavily on the staff that we do have.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. That is one of the reasons why we are performing the technical assistance, including working with your staff on several other applications. We realize it's a very complicated application, and our whole reason for doing so is to try to get the most competitive price we can. So not only can we use it for the funding sources that SCTCA has available, but to be able to go out and compete well for federal and state discretionary funds.
So I think it's not just applying, but it is the process after the applications have been put in and the work that the staff have to do to sit and review the applications. That's additional work that they have to do. So just the process in general. Thank you.
I just have a comment, and it's, how do we educate the public on roundabouts? I can't believe that, every time you turn around, they're just bashing you over these roundabouts, and you write and say, no, this is grant funding, or, you write something back. And it's just the same people, but they're getting louder and louder. Well, exactly. I agree. I don't expect it. It's just a comment.
We had definitely heard that feedback over the years, and we've tried educational videos and getting the word out. And I think for a lot of times, until people drive through a roundabout and do it regularly, they had that concern or feedback about it. And once you get used to it, it gets better. But you always have some that aren't in favor of roundabouts at all.
I also don't think that people recognize the value for people with disabilities. And, being able to not go across a 64-foot wide road, but you can actually stop in between as you're trying to shrink it down. And so, but they're not even respectful of people with disabilities, which is disappointing.
Okay, and so I think we'll take public comment on all of these reports. If there's any members of the public who would wish to make comment in person. Seeing none, we'll go to Zoom. Okay, thank you, and appreciate those reports. We also can open it up for public comment on closed session items. We didn't have a closed session today, so we don't need to do that item. And then finally, just announcements. So we will not be having an SCTCA meeting in August. So our next scheduled meeting will be in September. Any other announcements?
Just an FYI, Rona Park also voted unanimously to join the lawsuit.
Kings County or San Francisco?
Both.
Great, so did Healdsburg. Thank you for the update. And so did Petaluma. And I think the county on both. Okay, with that, we will adjourn. Thank you so much.
Good job.